Nui kia koutou katoa, ko Beacon Hill toku monga, ko Sherborne toku ara, ko Warwickshire toku rohi, no Ingarangi me Island aho, ke whakamarama aho e noho ana. Ko Pichana toku inwa, I'm the Chief Executive of the DHB, and kia ora to you all, and thank you for the opportunity to share with you a little bit this afternoon. I wanted to open by just commenting that actually we've just exemplified it, that for us, Te Toia Horangi is building on foundations that have been laid over many years. And I've not done the digging of the ground, but Amohaere and others before did that digging and hard labour when the soil wasn't receptive to being dug in a very different time and context. And so when I took on the role of CEO last year, I actually saw myself in this job as being a bridge from the old to the new in multiple domains, knowing that we were coming to a time of significant change. And you know, we've got the changes in the health sector. So I hadn't anticipated this bridge might be quite so short, but nonetheless, we'll see what we can do in a year and a half. But this, for me, is a journey. For our organisation is a journey. And we're all learning. How do we work together with the cultural backgrounds that we've all come from and braid something that matters and is lasting and is different from what we acquired when we started? And so when I look at the life of the DHB and its predecessor arrangements and hospitals, it's been a long, slow journey to come to the place that we are at now. But even the place that we're at now is still only a new starting point for the next leg of that journey. And so who knows what things will look like in 10 years. But if I reflect a little bit on a couple of my learnings in my starting with my previous role when I came into the DHB as Chief Operating Officer in 2014, it's right to acknowledge Amohaere and Poroto for opening doors for me personally, and Kipuaka and others on the screen here, who somehow picked on me and say, hey, come with us, we're going to do some marae visits. Well, this was new for me. And I can tell you, I totally freaked out. I really did not know what to expect. Nobody had prepared me for this. And I remember a visit to one marae where, despite Amohaere's pleadings to just go with an open heart and be receptive, I went with all the good stuff that we were doing in our performance standards and realised how catastrophically I'd missed totally what people were wanting to hear from me, and walked away and thought, well, I'm never doing that again. And that was only 6 or 7 years ago. But I want to just convey how significant it is for me and my background in being welcomed onto a marae as a person, being taught, spoken honestly to, slapped occasionally when you get things wrong, with great aroha and support and compassion. And I couldn't ask for any more than that. For my own journey, which enabled me in turn to take others on a journey. And I can't believe how many Kiwis have never stepped foot on a marae. I'm just stunned by that. And so as I look at the development that I've had and the DHB's had over the last few years, it's only 6 years ago when I started to open the door to Karakia for opening of meetings outside of our Māori health team, and saw the great frowns and consternation that that caused in the leaders above me at the time. Now it's the norm. And we need to be aware of tokenism in things becoming the norm as well, of course. And I remember dealing with a personnel issue a number of years ago when Poroto phoned me up and he said, "Pete, this is one of our team, and I just need to tell you, we don't do it like this." Now, I was the chief operating officer and I was just doing what I know you do. And he said, "I think we need to talk." And so we talked about this particular scenario, and he said, "You know, we're going to have to put this right." And I said, "Okay, what does that mean?" And then he told me what that meant. And I thought, oh my God, my manager's going to freak out if she hears this. So we actually spent a day on a restorative tikanga-based reconciliation process. And I could not believe Pākehā members of staff even turned up to those sessions, to be honest. They hadn't really got a clue what it was about or what we were trying to do. But it was one of the most powerful days for learning, and the impact of it across our teams said, there's a far better way than Pākehā-based HR processes to bring things to resolution. And I didn't tell my line manager about it ever, really, because it really would not have gone down well at that point. But now, 6 years ago, a tikanga-based reconciliation process is becoming quite well used. It's new this year, but well used for restoring relationships between staff, and it is quite wonderful. But you have to come to that with an open heart. So that's just a few learnings and a few reflections. But what I'd like to do is go on to is to talk a little bit about some of the practical things that have been developing, overlaid by Te Toia Horangi. And I'd like to start this by just sharing one screenshot, if my computer will do it for me. So just bear with me a second.
Have you got permission?
I think I do. Yes. Okay. So I'm only going to show this for a minute. So when I started as CEO, everybody said to me, "What's our strategy, Pete?" And of course, we've got, like DHBs and health systems, we've got strategies forever. The last thing we needed was another strategy. What we needed is to try and get stuff done. But what I did do is I listed all of our various strategies and extracted 4 key areas of focus. And these are those sections across the screen that you can see there. So in integrated healthcare, working across the whole of the system, a strong focus on equitable healthcare, which is both, from my perspective, reflecting our Titiriti commitment, and this was prior to, actually, no, I'll come to that in a second, but also geographical inequity as well, which usually aligns with inequity for Māori, but not always, between the East and Western Bay predominantly. Our third area is about our people, and trying to take our organisation from a place of seeing people just as a resource to the whole essence and fullness of individuals who give their time and service to health. And the fourth area, very much around what I've called that safe and compassionate patient care. And I felt that those 4 areas were encompassed, really, the majority of our pile of strategies that usually nobody ever looks at. But the fundamental thing is the application, after checking with our runanga, of the torua, the albatross symbolic of Te Toia Horangi, and you'll see that I've applied it here, overarching and touching on all areas. And so the debate that had been going on previously over the last couple of years on which is our primary strategy, I resolved by determining that Te Toia Horangi wasn't a strategy to sit on the bookshelf with all the other strategies. Actually, it's our philosophy of care. It's how we want to be and how we want to do and how we want to act around that for the future. And therefore, I've set that aside in that context of being a philosophy of care that flows throughout all we do, rather than any kind of competition with other strategies and so on. This arches and crosses over everything that we do and who we aspire to be. That was quite a significant shift, and but it isn't really set the scene for the various domains of function of the DHB, each thinking about how Te Toia Horangi should impact their work, their focus, their priorities, and how we do things. And being the CEO of a DHB, it's certainly not an easy job to pick, that's for sure. But I'm balancing this sense of both opportunity for the times that we're in, the sense of obligation and commitment that I feel, and the more time you spend on a marae with iwi, with kaumatua, the more you feel that sense of deep personal commitment. With the fact that we are not a kaupapa organisation, we are still a mainstream one. And so the walking between two worlds is very much a space that I live, and Amohaire will attest to that, because we spent a lot of time thinking and working through this over time. But some of the specifics really over the last year or so in terms of implementation, we released our very bold position statement, Titiriti position statement, in April this year. And it is bold, possibly because it commits us to things that were beyond our gift to be able to deliver. But nonetheless, we made an in good faith commitment, and a very solid commitment for the future. That stake in the ground now is being echoed across Te Manawataki, the Midland Regional DHBs, all of whom have taken that strong position statement and are incorporating that into their own organisational policy and gradually releasing as well. So we started a ripple effect with that courageous step. And from that, we've increasingly branded our organisation quite differently. We've got a Māori branding throughout much of the content of papers, documents. A particularly strong one is recently our sustainability strategy, environmental sustainability, which has got very strong Māori voice throughout, and the whole essence of kaitiakitanga in relation to the environment, which for you as Māori has been a fundamental part of who you are for always. And for us as Pākehā, we're having to accept how much we've screwed things up and race and scramble to try and put that right as quickly as possible. And so the essence of an Indigenous worldview about caring for our environment and world has come through very, very strongly in terms of that, environmental strategic approach. The four domains, the first one was around integrated care, how we design and deliver services. We've got a long, long way to go on the design, the partnership development of clinical service models that will achieve equity robustly across the board. But you have to start somewhere. And so within that box, we've got a number of areas of very obvious inequity that have been stubborn and historic, that we're prioritising as our KPIs across the DHB for until the end of December 2022, with a really strong drive to close those gaps. What Te Toi Ahorangi brings to that is the lens of the essence of our philosophy of care, saying, trying harder at the way we did things is not going to close that historic equity gap. And therefore, sorry, I've got some noise coming through. The approach that we're embarking on has to be going to ask the question, how do we actually do this in a way that will be successful? That requires a lot more time than we usually have, capacity, thought, knowing who to go to. So this is all a learning journey. But if we look at some of the basic things that we struggle with, childhood immunisations, child oral health, and the list is lengthy, breast screening, equity, that there's one actually that we have been very successful on. We're in the Bay, we're second best in the country, I've just been told, and that's on cervical screening for Māori Wahine. So thank you all for your contributions to spreading that message. You know, that prevents cancer and it saves lives. And we need to learn the lessons of that work stream in others. And so as we grow, the recognition that we can't do this from behind a desk within our hospital building and be successful is taking hold in the understanding of our teams. To the extent now that we've even got senior Pākehā doctors, heads of their service, coming to say, I've been looking at our waiting list and it's really out of balance. Where's all our Māori clients in the endoscopy queue? How come they're not getting referred? What's going on there? What are we doing wrong? And all of these things are ending up on the table of our Māori health team, Te Pareo Toi, saying, please, can you help us with this? So we are putting a huge burden on seeking answers, and somehow we need to work through that challenge, which I might come to in a few minutes. But it's wonderful to see, like when you light a piece of newspaper and that lit edge gradually spreads slowly and steadily across the page, consuming the paper and the text. That's what it feels like we're seeing happening across our organisation. It doesn't whip through, it spreads through slowly, but nonetheless it continues to spread, and you can see the implication of that. The third domain around our workforce is an area of immense opportunity. And so in terms of our recruitment now, our job descriptions, and Amohari and I started this with a very significant addition to job descriptions, and that not the state sector statements around titility, but actually the heart commitment coming through in our expectations of people around equity. That's moved on significantly in terms of our interview processes, our selection. We effectively, without saying so, screen for racism as best as we can, and look for the right kind of people that fit with our Manaakitanga values. A few years ago, we'd take anyone we could get if they thought they were technically good. We don't do that anymore. And I'll just say, in terms of screening for racism, we're looking for as Pākehā, we're looking for bits of ourselves that we might choose to deny or feel uncomfortable with in others when we're at that recruitment table. That's me acknowledging, along with Andrew Judd's statement, that we're all recovering racists, even if it's from ignorance of our own privilege in some extent because of our background. And so therefore, part of this is growing individually to be able to recognize that and identify that where that arises in us as individuals, and use that as the power to change things. And this is part of our individual learning journey. We're striving towards a proportional workforce that reflects more than our ethnicity makeup across the Bay, and of course that's different for East and Western Bay. And that's pretty hard when the system has made it very difficult for Māori to enter healthcare professional careers in the past. So there's a lot of catch-up work to do. And I would hope that we will get to a point in New Zealand's workforce planning future that significant barriers to accessing things like whether it's medical, allied health, nursing training or others, where there's an overemphasis on academic qualifications as the access criteria. I sincerely hope they become challenged because they are not necessary in many cases, and they preclude many good people from being able to step into the healthcare arena. I can tell you as DHB CEOs, this is something we're challenging currently. It's not an easy challenge, but we want to find a way to bring people through that don't have the educational background that the system says is required, but we can find ways to bypass that. And that's definitely a conversation for another day, but something we're working on in terms of internships currently that don't require all the tickets, actually, that often don't add anything in real value. Workforce policy, this is the Bay of Plenty, this is Tauranga, it's very traditionalist, and so we're trying to break through into new people-focused workforce policies. And I've asked our new HR manager to throw away the old lot and actually to come up with something that really works for people. And what I've observed is that if we get an approach right that resonates and supports Māori worldviews, we'll get that right for people, full stop. And so we're starting to seriously rethink many of our people policies and say, how would this work for Māori in terms of traditional things like a disciplinary process, hiring, exiting, and all the other things that you have to do? Because, hey, our Pākehā ones don't work for anyone. So it's kind of back to the drawing board on that front, and that's where we're going. So just a few other things, and I'll just, I'm conscious of keeping my eye on the clock. I think that the way we invest and prioritise, that this is going to be a really big one for the future. There's a common narrative that's become far more prolific this year, that the DHBs have failed in their task. I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think the health system hasn't failed in what it really needed. I think the health system has significantly failed in what it really needed to do in terms of equitable healthcare. But I actually don't think the DHBs have failed. And the reason I'll say that is because the DHBs have delivered exactly what politicians asked for them, which was waiting time targets, which is speed of access, all done on a shoestring budget that's insufficient to meet the real needs of our communities. What nobody seemed to realise is that what we were being asked to provide wasn't really what our communities needed or were deeply aspiring to. And so this shift from the current state to the future state is probably the biggest opportunity in New Zealand's history for you as members of our community, as Māori, as leaders in your iwi, to help influence and shape what needs to be in a way that we can reach and meet the significant unmet needs across our communities. And we've got spotlights of excellence in the Bay. where we're working out how to do stuff. And as you know, DHBs, and in future it will be hospitals, we need to take our hands off a lot more. The problem is we've not actually been allowed to, because we've been tasked with the delivery. And so we've been in this dichotomy. And if you read Y2575, which is a very long document, but one of the most thought-provoking analysis of inequity that I think I've ever read, that is what made me realise what the system is designed to deliver, funded to deliver, and monitored to deliver is totally at odds with an equitable approach that works. And so it would be my sincere hope that the changes in the health reforms do break that, but it is going to require one very significant shift that nobody has yet dared traverse, which in my personal view is that politicians need to take their hands off health and the investment of health resources as a political point scoring exercise, and genuinely trust communities to determine what's needed within each area and for each iwi and for each whānau and hapu. And if we get to that, then we're really on a hot track to success. And it was my deep hope that we do that. I'm just going to raise a few final issues in closing with our journey and a few observations. First of all, I would say that recently we all had to, many of you will have seen this, and I don't know where it came from, but there was a national survey on Māori leadership and what is needed for the future to support the growth of Māori leadership across all domains and sectors. And as I looked at the questions, something significant occurred to me in that the inherent aptitudes, whakapapa, sense of tikanga, sense of commitment and cause that flow in a te ao Māori worldview, if translated into leadership language, are exactly the characteristics that the new world of work and leadership is looking for. It's not the training that I had in my generation.
Traditional.
And so I think this is the time for Māori leaders to be encouraged by iwi, encouraged by the system, to step up without compromising where you come from and what you bring to the table. However, there is a catch, because with the current low numbers of Māori in influential positions, the load that falls on people's shoulders and within healthcare will increasingly do so, is a load too much to carry. And I'm very fearful for my own Māori leadership team, because of the great depth of purpose that they carry and the expectations that sit on their shoulders. The risk of burnout, breakdown and exhaustion is very, very high. And as the doors open to Māori leadership, in fact, more than open, please can you come here and tell us how to do this, because we've screwed it up. That demand and need is growing rapidly at this time. And so that's going to be one of the challenges to traverse in the future, and very much so in the health system. And another learning for us over this last year, and one that we need to deal with internally, and I hesitate to mention it because it's still full of great pain, but that leaflet thing that caused us so much distress and hurt is not a simple story behind that. It's actually quite a tragedy, I'll say. But one of the learnings and challenges for us is who can speak for iwi when we're taking a significant decision. And that is one of the things that we're grappling with at the moment within our organisation, actually. Who carries that voice and who has that say when we are now genuinely looking to achieve that voice and that say in things. I think finally, my personal worldview, through my lens at this point in my life, it may change, is that the opportunities for us in the future lie in the space in between. The space where grace and compassion and forgiveness characterize an opportunity to bring all of our very best to the table, to craft a world that we've never known. And I'm immensely thrilled at how that progress is going for us at this time when things seem to be really speeding up. And I'm going to say I'm immensely grateful for my wife too, who constantly talks to me about this space in between. And it's not my story to tell, but there's a deep and powerful story there. I see it as the space of magic where the very best of us can flourish, and together we can work out how to enhance well-being, flourishing communities, flourishing whānau, because that's really what matters to us, and that's why we're in this. So kia ora everyone, it's 5:30 and that is the end of my time, and so I'll come to a close there.
That's wonderful.